The moment I pressed play, my heart stopped. It wasn't a movie. It wasn't a TV show. It was me. I was standing in our bedroom, folding laundry, humming to myself, completely unaware that a camera was hidden inside the smoke detector above my head. And my husband, the man I thought I knew better than anyone, was on the screen, smirking at his phone while watching me, like I was some object. In that moment, the air in the room felt heavy, like the oxygen had been replaced with fire. My hands were shaking so hard I almost dropped the phone. He thought his camera was hidden. But mine would be better. My name is Alina. I'm 32 years old, and until a few weeks ago, I believed my marriage to David was safe, stable, and maybe not perfect but good. We met 8 years ago at a bookstore. I was on the floor, struggling to reach the last copy of a photography book on the top shelf. David reached up, got it for me, and smiled like he'd just rescued me from a burning building. It sounds cliché, I know, but back then that smile meant something. We started dating, moved in together within a year, and married 2 years later. David was charming, smart, and supportive, or at least, he knew how to play the part. I remember my mother telling me, on our wedding day, "Sweetheart, marriage is about trust. If you lose that, you lose everything." At the time, I thought she was just being cautious. Now, I know she was warning me. Our first apartment was tiny. The walls were thin, the floorboards creaked, and the kitchen had just enough space for one person at a time. But I loved it. We would sit on the floor at night, eating takeout and talking about our future. He would tell me about the big house we'd buy someday, how he'd build me my own photography studio, and how we'd have 2 kids, one with your smile, one with my stubbornness, he'd joke. I thought we were building a life together. What I didn't know was that he was building secrets. Photography has always been my passion. I see the world in frames, in lighting, in angles. I notice details most people miss: a shadow moving when it shouldn't, a reflection in glass, a lens where there shouldn't be one. Ironically, that skill is what would save me. Because one day, I noticed something that didn't belong. It started with a buzzing sound. A faint, electric hum coming from the ceiling in our bedroom. At first, I thought it was just the old smoke detector. But then, I noticed it had a tiny red dot. One that wasn't there before. It was so faint you'd miss it, unless you were looking for it. But I was looking. I stood on a chair and took it down, thinking maybe it was broken. That's when I saw it, the lens. A camera. My stomach twisted. I didn't even know what to feel at first: fear, shock, anger, disgust. It was like all of them hit me at once. I knew I couldn't confront him yet. If I did, he'd deny it, hide it, maybe destroy any proof I could find. So I pretended I didn't see it. I put the smoke detector back, heart pounding so hard I thought it might give me away. That night, when David was in the shower, I went through his desk drawers. And I found it, a small black hard drive, tucked under a pile of receipts. I plugged it into my laptop, hands trembling. And there it was. Dozens of videos. All of me. Cooking. Sleeping. Changing clothes. Even showering. He had been watching me like I was some kind of experiment. I wanted to scream. I wanted to smash the laptop, throw the hard drive into the ocean, and run as far away as I could. But I didn't. Because deep down, I knew this was bigger than just humiliation. This was about control. This was about power. And if he wanted power, I would take it away from him. Completely. That night, as I lay in bed pretending to sleep, I started thinking about the one thing David never considered. If he could hide a camera, so could I. And when I was done, I wouldn't just have revenge. I'd have proof. The kind you can't deny. From the outside, our life looked like something out of a lifestyle magazine. David had a stable job at an architecture firm. I was running a small but growing photography business from home. We posted smiling pictures on social media, anniversary dinners, vacations, sunsets on the beach. People would comment things like, "Couple goals. You two are perfect together." But behind the camera, there were cracks. Small ones at first. The kind you almost don't notice until the whole thing starts to split. It was about 3 years into our marriage. I had just landed my first big photography contract with a travel magazine. It was a dream come true, weeks of shooting in beautiful locations, my name in print. I came home that day, ready to tell David the news, expecting him to sweep me into his arms and say, "I'm so proud of you." Instead, he just nodded. "That's nice, Elena, but who's going to cook dinner while you're gone?" I laughed, thinking he was joking. But he was. It was the first time I saw it, the subtle way he dismissed my success, like it was a hobby, not a career. After that, little things changed. If I went out with friends, he'd ask me dozens of questions about where I was, who I was with, what time I'd be home. If I bought something for myself, he'd ask why I needed it. He didn't yell. He didn't hit me. But his words, his tone, they chipped away at me. He made me feel like I owed him every detail of my life. Looking back now, I realize the hidden camera wasn't sudden. It was the final step in a long process of control. He had already been monitoring my phone. He knew my passwords. And the camera was just his way of owning all of me. One night, we were sitting in the living room. The TV was on, but I could feel him watching me instead of the screen. Finally, he said, "If you ever cheated on me, I'd know. I'd see it in your face." I remember my stomach tightening. "Why would you say that?" I asked. He smiled, that slow, smug smile that I would later come to hate. "Because I'm always watching." At the time, I thought it was just a strange, dark joke. Now I know he meant it, literally. I stopped inviting friends over. I stopped going out unless I had to. Somewhere inside, I felt like I was under a spotlight all the time, even in my own home. It's strange, the more you're watched, the more invisible you start to feel. Like you're just a subject in someone else's movie. But here's the thing about me. If you push me into a corner, I don't just hide. I find a way to push back. The night I found that first hidden camera, I didn't sleep. I lay there, staring at the ceiling, my mind spinning. David was breathing softly beside me, completely unaware that I now knew his secret. And that's when the thought hit me. If he could secretly watch me, I could secretly watch him. Only difference. I would make sure my camera caught the truth. I knew I couldn't rush. I had to play this slow. David was careful, paranoid even. If he sensed I was onto him, he'd erase everything and disappear behind a wall of lies. So I went about my days like nothing had changed. I cooked his favorite meals. I laughed at his jokes. I let him believe he was winning. All the while, I was planning the trap. Around this time, my mother called me one afternoon. She said she'd been having dreams about me. "You're not happy, are you?" she asked. I wanted to tell her everything about the camera, the control, the constant watching. But I didn't. Not yet. Because this wasn't just about escaping. This was about making sure he could never do this to me or anyone again. I didn't know it yet. But the first move in my revenge would come from his own arrogance. One night, he left his phone on the kitchen counter. Unlocked. With a notification from an app I'd never seen before. And that's when I discovered the camera in our bedroom wasn't the only one. It was late, the kind of late when the house feels different, quieter, heavier. David had gone to bed early after one of his long days at work. I was in the kitchen, cleaning up, when his phone buzzed on the counter. It wasn't unusual for him to leave it lying around. He trusted that I wouldn't look. And normally, I didn't. But that night, the screen lit up with a notification I'd never seen before. It was from an app called Homai. The preview read, "Motion detected in kitchen cam." My heart started pounding. Kitchen cam. I glanced up at the corner of the room. And there it was, a tiny black lens peeking from behind a decorative wall clock. I didn't touch the phone. I didn't want to risk him noticing. Instead, I walked slowly through the house, pretending to tidy up. In the living room, a camera tucked inside a bookshelf speaker. In the hallway, a pinhole lens hidden in the smoke alarm. In my home office, a camera disguised as a photo frame. They were everywhere. Watching me cook, watching me work, watching me sleep. Every single moment of my life, recorded. I went back to the kitchen, gripping the edge of the counter to steady myself. I couldn't decide if I wanted to cry, scream, or just disappear. And yet, beneath all the hurt, something else began to grow. A spark. A dangerous, determined spark. If he wanted to watch me, then I'd give him something worth watching. The next morning, while David was at work, I took my camera, my real camera, and photographed every hidden device I could find. I took close-ups, wide shots, angles that would make it impossible to deny later. Then I placed each camera exactly where it had been, making sure nothing looked disturbed. I wasn't ready to take them down. Not yet. I needed them to stay right where they were, so he'd feel safe. For the next week, I played the role of the perfect wife. I made coffee before he woke up. I laughed at his stories. I even let him think I was too busy to notice how distracted he seemed, always checking that Homai app. But in my private time, I was building my counterattack. I ordered a small, discreet camera online, one with better resolution than any of his. It looked like a normal phone charger. When plugged into the wall, it recorded everything in front of it. And I knew exactly where to put it. Our home office was the one place David liked to work when he was off the clock. It was also the only room with a desk drawer where he kept important things. I positioned my hidden camera in the corner, facing that desk, angled just enough to capture anyone sitting there. I tested it 3 times to make sure it worked, then left it plugged in. From now on, I wasn't just being watched. I was watching him. 3 nights later, my patience paid off. David was in the office, leaning over his desk, talking on the phone. He didn't know my new camera was recording every word. "No, she doesn't suspect a thing," he said, his voice low. "Yeah, I've got plenty of footage. Trust me, she'll look guilty as hell when I'm done." I froze when I heard that. Guilty. Was he planning to frame me for something? That one line changed everything. It wasn't enough anymore to just expose his hidden cameras. I had to get him to confess, in his own words, exactly what he was doing and why. Because if I could get that, I could burn his entire plan to the ground in one move. The trick was making him comfortable enough to talk. He had to believe I was still clueless, still obedient, still trapped in his little cage. And so, I decided to give him the illusion of victory. I would leave small hints for him to think I was vulnerable, late-night phone calls with friends, whispered conversations in the kitchen, mysterious trips out. I knew he'd watch every second, convinced he was catching me in some imagined betrayal. And when he finally confronted me about it, that's when I'd turn the tables. What I didn't realize yet was that his ego would make this even easier than I thought. Because David was about to give me my confession on a silver platter. It happened on a Tuesday afternoon. David came home early, saying he had a migraine. He went straight into the office and shut the door. I was in the kitchen making tea when I heard his voice. It was faint at first, just a murmur through the wall, but then it got louder. "I've almost got enough to take everything," he said. "Yeah, the lawyer said the videos are perfect. She won't see a penny." My hands tightened around the mug until I thought it would shatter. He wasn't just spying. He was building a case to destroy me. That night, after he left for the gym, I went into the office and pulled up my hidden camera footage. It had recorded the whole conversation. He was talking to his best friend, Paul. They were laughing about how, once the evidence was ready, David would file for divorce and make it look like I had been cheating. "Judges eat that stuff up," Paul had said. "Especially if you've got video." And then David replied with a sentence that burned into my memory. "She's too trusting to know she's being played." I thought back to our wedding day, the way he looked at me when we exchanged vows. "I promise to protect you." Those were his exact words. Now I knew what he really meant. He'd protect himself. From me. By destroying me first. I could have walked away right then. Packed my things, taken my camera evidence, and gone straight to a lawyer. But that would have only stopped the damage. It wouldn't have exposed him. And exposing him was the only way to make sure he could never do this to someone else. The next day, I started acting different. Not enough to raise suspicion, just enough to give him something to chew on. I'd stay up late working in the living room, whispering into my phone. I'd smile at text messages that didn't exist. I even started wearing perfume when I went to the grocery store. I knew he was watching all of it through his cameras, probably saving every clip like a trophy. And slowly, I could see it in his eyes. He thought he was winning. A week later, while we were having dinner, David looked up from his plate and smirked. "Long phone call last night," he said casually. "Friend from college." I froze for half a second, then forced a smile. "Yeah, we had a lot to catch up on." He nodded slowly, like a detective watching a suspect hang themselves. And I realized he was itching to confront me. He just wanted the perfect moment to deliver the blow. So I decided to make that perfect moment happen on my terms. I set up my hidden camera in the living room, this time facing the couch where I knew we'd be sitting. It had an excellent microphone. It would pick up every word, every tone, every breath. Then I spent the next 2 days feeding his ego. Casual slips of "I've been so busy lately, and I have something important to tell you." I could practically see him rehearsing his speech in his head. Saturday night, I made his favorite dinner: steak, roasted potatoes, a glass of red wine. He thought it was an apology meal. In reality, it was a celebration for me. I poured him a second glass, waited until his shoulders relaxed, and then said, "David, we need to talk." His eyes lit up. This was it, the moment he'd been waiting for. What he didn't know was that while he thought he was cornering me, I was already recording the confession that would ruin him forever. The air between us was thick. I could feel his anticipation like static before a storm. "We need to talk," I said again, softer this time. I leaned back on the couch, my eyes locked on his, and let a small, nervous smile play on my lips, just enough to make him think I was about to spill something shameful. "About what?" he asked, his voice steady but his grip on the wine glass tightening. I hesitated deliberately, then sighed. "I've been feeling distant lately, like we've both been hiding things." His eyebrows shot up, not in surprise, but in satisfaction. He thought I was walking straight into his trap. "Funny you should say that," he replied, leaning forward. "Because I know you've been hiding things, Alina, and I have proof." My heart pounded, but I kept my expression somewhere between guilty and confused. "Proof? What do you mean?" He smirked, the exact smirk I'd been waiting for. "You think I don't know about the late-night calls, the secret smiles, the perfume when you go shopping?" I let my lips part slightly, like I was about to deny it, then closed them again, glancing at the floor. That small silence was the bait, and he took it. "I've been watching you for months," he said, almost proudly. "Every room, every move. I've got hours of footage, enough to make a judge believe whatever I want." Inside, my blood boiled. Outside, I kept my face perfectly still, letting him believe I was cornered. "Why would you do that?" I whispered. "Because I'm not stupid," he snapped. "I knew one day you betray me, so I made sure I could destroy you first. When I file for divorce, you'll walk away with nothing. Everyone will think you cheated, and the best part, you won't even be able to prove I set you up." Every word was dripping into my hidden camera's microphone. Every word was a nail in his own coffin. I tilted my head, looking at him with what I knew would read as hurt, not anger. "So you've been filming me without my knowledge, all this time?" He laughed, actually laughed. "Of course I have. You think those smoke detectors were real. You think that photo frame in your office was just decoration. I've got cameras you don't even know about." I let my eyes widen, my breath catch. "But that's illegal." "Not if no one finds out," he said smugly, sipping his wine. He didn't realize it, but the moment those words left his mouth, I was already free. I had him. Not just as a creep, not just as a liar, but as a man who had just confessed in detail to a criminal act. I leaned forward slightly and said, "Thank you for being honest, David." "What's that supposed to mean?" he asked. "It means," I said, my voice suddenly steady, "you just told me everything I needed to hear." For the first time that night, I saw something in his eyes that hadn't been there before. Doubt. It was quick, just a flicker, but it was enough to tell me the tide had turned. I smiled, not warmly, not kindly, just knowingly. "You're going to want to remember this moment," I said quietly. "Because it's the last time you'll think you're in control." The very next morning, my lawyer and I walked into the courthouse with something David never expected. His own voice sealing his fate. And what happened in that courtroom was more satisfying than I could have ever imagined. The morning we went to court, the sky was a dull gray. It felt heavy, like it knew a storm was coming. I wore a simple black dress, nothing flashy, the kind of thing that made me look serious, credible. David arrived in a tailored suit, grinning like a man who had already won. He didn't even glance at me as we sat down. To him, I was already the defeated wife, the one who'd walk out humiliated while he strutted out the hero. He had no idea the game had flipped. When it was his turn to speak, David stood with all the confidence of a man who thought the world was on his side. "Your Honor," he began, "my wife has been unfaithful. I have video evidence showing her suspicious behavior, late-night calls, and interactions with other men. She has betrayed our vows, and I believe I should be granted the divorce with full control of our assets." He delivered every word like it was scripture, looking over at me once or twice to see if I'd flinch. I didn't. I sat still, hands folded, eyes calm. When it was our turn, my lawyer, a calm, razor-sharp woman named Rachel, stood. "Your Honor, while my client acknowledges her husband has presented video recordings, we believe the court should see exactly how those recordings were obtained." David shifted in his seat. That was the first tiny crack. Rachel pressed play on a small monitor in front of the judge. There was David, sitting on our couch, wine in hand, smirking. "I've been watching you for months," his voice filled the room. "Every room, every move. I've got hours of footage, enough to make a judge believe whatever I want." The courtroom went silent. Then came the part that made my heart race, not in fear, but in victory. "You think those smoke detectors were real. You think that photo frame in your office was just decoration. I've got cameras you don't even know about." The judge's face hardened. David's lawyer shifted uncomfortably. David went pale. "Your Honor," Rachel continued, "these recordings were taken without my client's consent. What you just heard is not only an admission of spying, but also of intent to manipulate evidence in a divorce proceeding. David's voice from the recording echoed again. When I file for divorce, you'll walk away with nothing. Everyone will think you cheated. It was over. He knew it. I knew it. The judge leaned forward. Mr. Hayes, these actions are a clear violation of privacy laws and an attempt to mislead the court. Not only will your evidence be dismissed, but we will be referring this matter to the district attorney for further investigation. David's jaw tightened, his hands gripping the table until his knuckles turned white. The judge then turned to me. Mrs. Hayes, you will be granted the divorce with full asset division in your favor, along with a restraining order. As we left the courtroom, I didn't look back at him. I didn't need to. I could feel the weight of his defeat, following me like a shadow. Outside, Rachel smiled. That's what we call a clean win. I nodded, breathing in the crisp air like it was the first breath I'd taken in months. But even after winning in court, there was one last thing I needed to do to close this chapter for good. Because revenge isn't truly complete until you take back the power they stole. For the first time in years, my house felt like mine again. The silence wasn't heavy anymore. It wasn't the silence of being watched, it was the silence of peace. The first thing I did was take down every hidden camera David had planted. Every smoke detector with a lens. Every decorative photo frame. Every speaker, clock, and tiny gadget that had been his eyes on me. I smashed them all in the driveway with a hammer until they were nothing but wires and shards. And with each hit, I felt lighter. A week later, I walked into the bank with the court order in hand. Every joint account we'd had was now mine. Every asset he'd tried to hide was frozen in my name. David had been stripped of the control he craved. His accounts were empty. His reputation was in ruins. And his criminal investigation was only just beginning. I didn't need to see him suffer. I just needed to know he couldn't hurt me or anyone else ever again. I rented a new studio for my photography business, bigger than anything I'd had before. Bright windows, white walls. No shadows in the corners. The first shoot I did there wasn't for a client, it was for me. Self-portraits. Not posed. Not edited. Just me in the sunlight free. For years, I had been a subject in his movie. Now I was my own director. If you've ever felt trapped, if you've ever felt like your life isn't yours anymore, know this. You can take it back. It won't be easy. It will hurt. You will have nights where you lie awake wondering if you have the strength. But you do. Because the moment you decide you're done being the victim, you start becoming the author of your own ending. One evening, I walked past a cafe window and saw my reflection in the glass. I stopped for a moment, remembering all the times I'd felt small, invisible, powerless. But the woman looking back at me wasn't that person anymore. Her shoulders were straight. Her eyes were steady. And her smile was real. David thought his camera was hidden. But mine was better. Because it didn't just record his confession. It recorded the exact moment I took my life back.